Hi, Cara.
Hi, Vanessa.
We're recording this episode in April of 2025, which normally, when we make that statement, it's because there are major cultural, social, political, and legislative shifts in our reality that we're addressing. But this is not the case for this particular episode.
You mean the importance of time stamping?
Yes.
Yes. No, I mean, we could timestamp on those counts as well right now. Let us
We
be
could,
clear.
but
We
it's
could, but
really
we're
nice.
not gonna.
It's really nice to not timestamp on those counts and instead
Yes.
timestamp on what it means to be a parent and trusted adult of a kid and managing end of year celebrations, milestones, things like proms and graduations and final, recitals or cast parties or all of the things that make life really thrilling and exciting when you are a kid and a teen and a young adult, and also the things that can be really stressful as parents and caregivers of that kid or teen or young adult, and sort of having one foot in the experience and one foot out, worrying and maybe even stressing out a bit about them.
Yes. I mean, we have in the past called this, not our phrase, but we borrow it from many others, the 100 Days of May. The 100 Days of May are packed with all sorts of traditions and celebrations that get complicated. They get
Very,
complicated.
very complicated.
Yeah.
As as someone who has ordered and returned with my kid about 30 prom dresses at this point, that's a little bit complicated. As someone preparing for a college graduation, that's a little bit complicated. In my family, there's a 5th grade graduation coming up, an 8th grade graduation coming up, and 2 college graduations coming up. So we're super aware of that. So there's kind of 3 buckets I want to talk about today, Cara, as we think about these big, important milestone moments. One is the bucket, of course, of safety, which is a biggie. There's kids in LA coming home from Coachella as we speak. There are kids coming back from spring break trips recently, right? So that's front of mind for lots of folks who either let their kids go or didn't let their kids go, depending. So kids' safety is a biggie. The second thing I want to talk about is family dynamics. So sibling to sibling, parent to kid, grandparents is a biggie. And then the last bucket I want to cover is how we manage our own emotions around these events, how we communicate with our kids, how we express them, how we deal with the very big feelings we're having around these big moments.
And as always, we will connect this to where kids are at different stages in their life, because a lot of these celebrations really require a certain amount of decision making and executive functioning that we need our kids to have and they may not have. And so I think this is the crux of the complication, right? Is they are, I hate to summarize it in such a base way, but they're hormone fueled teenagers who are stepping into these rites of passage. And they are going to make decisions. I'm not going to put the adjective on there. They're going to make decisions.
But it starts with an SH and ends with an itty.
That is right, Vanessa. That is what they are going to do. And it's so freaking predictable. And so what do you do? Like, how do you parent through this when you could write the script? It's
Right.
April right now. We're talking about things that are happening in May, and we're literally going to write the script for you. And you could do it too. We're just we're just there by your side, like we're like sitting on your shoulder going, yep, yep, mm-hmm, yep, that too.
Just what we expected.
Right.
So,
and I just want to add one other thing, which is if there's a through line to any of this, I hate to beat a dead horse. Regular listeners know that we preach this, but more than ever, approach the month of May with no judgment. Judgment will get you nowhere. Shaming will get you nowhere. So this is a conversation about what conversations need to be had on the eve of all of these celebrations, because you got to talk about it, but you got to talk about it in an open way. You've got to have a conversation, not a lecture.
So when we were growing up, Cara, prom, for example, looked different in a number of ways,
You
right?
know, I'm still friends with my prom date from high school.
That is very sweet.
Yeah, he and his wife come over for dinner occasionally. We hang out with, he's the nicest guy in the universe. And we always love to play this party trick where if we're with other people, we're like, we were prom dates in high school.
So clearly you guys didn't get up to any of the things we're going to talk about if you guys are still friends and having dinner with each other's spouses.
I'm not gonna answer that, Vanessa, and I'm gonna leave people wondering.
Let people draw their own conclusions, knowing what they know about you, and also the conversation we're about to have.
Maybe, just maybe, we will throw onto the cover art or into the YouTube episode pictures of us in our prom dresses. Let's just maybe do that.
Very interesting.
That'd be amazing.
Very interesting.
Yes, go on. So prom in our day.
So prom in our day was different on a few fronts. And I won't make assumptions because across the country, I'm sure there were different traditions and all of that. But one thing that people did if they could muster up the resources was to get a limousine to take them to prom and to whatever was happening after prom. One of the fascinating things I've learned in watching a couple of kids go through this process and, continue to kind of keep an eye on it for my next two kids is that the sort of the limousine of it all seems to have disappeared with Uber, and also the plans seem to have gotten more complicated. So it's not just like prom night and then you go somewhere afterwards. It's pre-pictures and then school pictures and then prom and then the after party. And then often kids are going away for a weekend somewhere. Maybe someone has a house somewhere on the beach. And then it's not just 12 hours. It can become several days without the boundaries of the limousines picking you up at this time and dropping you off at this time, which it presents a series of logistical challenges, which I want to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I think the limousine / party bus still very much exists. It did in my kids' prom existence. It requires a kid or a parent, but usually a kid, who organizes it and convinces other kids that it would be a cool, fun way to travel. And if you've got that kid, and it's, everyone knows exactly which kid is going to be the planner of that. It's the one with the executive function skills who can collect money from the other kids to cover the cost of it. But that has its own anxieties, I think, particularly the party bus concept, which I will tell you, not the prom date who I'm still friends with, a different prom. We had junior and senior proms, as many, many kids do. And I'm not going to say which prom, but one of my proms, which was with this other prom date, we were in a limo with, I don't know, maybe 3 other couples. And I didn't really know him very well. We were acquaintances, but it was sort of one of those blind fix-ups, which happens all the time.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
All the time. And I will tell you, his first shot across the bow, getting to know you question for me, just very much burned in my brain. I can remember it like it was yesterday. You'll see why. Was, would you like a line of cocaine?
Clearly, he did not know you very well.
He did not know his audience.
I mean, in fairness, it was the 1980s in Los Angeles. So that for most people, that would have been a fair
Correct.
question.
That might have like stood a chance for some people. But I think the point being, it wasn't like, an innocent adventure then, and it is steeped in, danger, intrigue, and mystery and drugs now. It just presents in a 2025 version now.
Right. So I want to think for a second about how it's different. So it is still an exciting, novel milestone for kids. It still represents to them an opportunity to maybe reinvent themselves a little bit, maybe present themselves differently, either go with a good friend or someone they're dating or hooking up with, or go with someone they don't know very well. And I want to dive into that in a second. Cara, thank you for the perfect opening
welcome.
for that.
I've never told you that story, I don't think.
But also there was pressure in our day for prom to be a big thing, and we took it seriously, many of us, and we cared about the photos. But now the pressure is even greater because there's the posting on social media and the sort of voyeurism of that. And also there's pressure for it to be even more of a thing, not just a night, but maybe several days. And also the things they get up to in the days, if they go away for the weekend or there's some after party, there's also all sorts of expectations and pressures, both on social media and in person, for that to present as something very exciting and very special. And
even the invitation, the promposal, that did not
so the
exist.
promposal which didn't exist.
No, did not exist.
For the uninitiated, the promposal is, a person asking another person to prom. It's filmed, it's posted. Often schools have like a promposal Instagram account.
They do?
I mean, my kid's school does.
I didn't know that.
It's actually so funny because my kids allowed my mom, like they told her the handle of the promposal so she could see her grandson's promposal, but we had to be explicitly clear that there was no commenting on the promposal video. I mean,
what
God
could
forbid,
go wrong?
What could go
Vanessa?
wrong? So I guess not all schools, but some schools, they post them on video. So promposal is like cute, clever ways to ask people. It's, to me, shockingly still very heteronormative, at least in the communities and circles that I'm in. I'm hoping that maybe there are other communities where it's less heteronormative, but there's like so many rituals, and some of them are adorable and great, but they carry with them a lot of pressure.
A lot.
And so there's two things that I want to dive into, Cara, and then obviously please add. One is the logistical planning and scenario planning around kids moving from place to place, doing it safely, and sort of contingency planning with them. So my kids were not in limos. As parents, we gave them rides to like the pre-prom stuff. And then school has a bus that takes them to from prom and back. And then they got Ubers to whatever the after party was. But then came the rub, which was late at night when they needed to get to wherever they wanted to sleep that night.
Right.
They couldn't get rides. They couldn't get Ubers. And so they were kind of stuck. And I knew enough from the first one. It very kindly, an older sibling who was home from college in her 20s went and picked up a group of kids and brought them back to a house. My second one had to rejigger his planning because he couldn't get an Uber when he wanted, even after my, of course, saying to him, hey, you should probably like schedule an Uber and plan this, but they don't want to be hamstrung by, a scheduled Uber because they want the flexibility to move and shift as plans change.
And scheduled Ubers cancel. I think,
too.
I think it's an appropriate moment to broaden the lens, just to say grad nights and all these celebrations have very similar baked in problems. The one difference between a grad night per se and a prom night or another activity is grad night tends to be school sponsored. The school takes care of the transportation. The kids it's very much like sort of the last day of being under the purview of the school. And so there's this bizarre thing that happens, which prom, which usually precedes grad night, prom, it's like the gates are wide open and the rules don't exist. And grad night, they're they're all in school buses. They're being watched closely. Their parents who are chaperoning. I mean, it felt like it was the upside down land to me when my kids were going through it. I don't know,
So
Vanessa, if you felt that way.
my kids' school, there is transportation. There are not parent chaperones, but faculty chaperones.
Right,
And
faculty chaperones,
the
for sure.
stress about prom from a parent's perspective is that it happens before graduation. And if something goes wrong,
Right.
if your
Okay, there's
kid
that.
makes a bad decision or flouts the rules or, does something that violates the expectations, there's real risk about
Yes.
how that impacts graduation. Now, I haven't heard of kids not being able to graduate, but I've heard of kids not being able to walk at graduation or having certain limitations at graduation because of their behavior at prom, things like drinking at prom or showing up to prom in a state that is not safe and not appropriate for prom because of pre-gaming. Those are a couple of the things.
And some of that is to this point that grad nights tend to be kids graduate, they may have a break where they go for a meal with their family or whatever, and then they're like back at school on a bus and it's many, many, many hours. It doesn't allow for any of these shenanigans.
Oh,
that
ye
happen.
of little faith, Cara. Kids will always find a way.
Sorry, editing. There is less opportunity. There's less opportunity. Whereas prom is this 2-hour window where the doors are locked and they have to be in the venue. And then before and after, it's a free for all. I want to double down on your comment about transportation, which I think is a really important one, because this speaks to the predictability. So as sure as I am sitting here with headphones on and a microphone in front of my face, your child, wherever you are across the country, will not be able to reliably get a ride from Uber or Lyft or any of the ride shares at 12, 1, 2 in the morning on prom night because everyone else in your city
4, 5, or 6 in the morning.
Yes, exactly. Because everyone else in your city is making the same plan, number one. And number two, if you ever talk to those Uber drivers and Lyft drivers as the adult in the backseat and ask them about their experiences driving kids post-prom, they're like, I am out. My car is destroyed. I will not make that choice to drive those kids. So there is some planning to be done here. In my house, I was so aware of it that I just said to my kids, a parent is going to do the pickup from the end of the night because you have to have someone it can be a cousin who's trustworthy. It can be an older sibling but like there's an assigned person. You guys choose who the assigned person is. But it's just 100% guaranteed that the rideshare plan will not work.
Right. And I like that idea because the kids may not want, a parent doing the pickup. So I really it was fortuitous that this particular older sibling was able to pick up one of my kids. And for this next go around, I actually am going to ask my older boys if one of them would be willing to do the pickup because it's actually fun for them and it's fun for the kids who are being picked up. And also it's sort of like a bridge personality. It's not a parent or an adult who's going to freak out, but it is someone who's got experience and knowledge. So if you have a kid heading to any of these kinds of events, plan ahead. Right. It might mean that you yourself may end up being the person who needs to do it, in which case you need to make choices about your own consumption of alcohol, for example. Sometimes parents get together after prom and celebrate. And it may mean that you need to be a designated driver later in the night. So it just requires some planning. The other thing that it's really important to think about is what are kids doing sort of in terms of physical intimacy or sexually. You may have a kid who's been with their prom date for 2 years in a committed relationship. So theoretically, if you listen to this podcast, you've had many, many conversations with that kid about safe sex and respectful, loving, meaningful, fun sex. If you have a kid who's going with a stranger, and I say stranger, they may know them, they may have met them, they may have hung out with them a little bit, but they may not know them well enough to see the signs of when things are going sideways. They may feel less comfortable speaking up if they don't feel safe or they're worried about a situation. That's really an opportunity for role play with that kid. Hey, what would you do if an insert scenario there? Your kid can say to you, oh, that's not going to happen. And you can say to your kid, you bet your booty it's going to happen. And really having a conversation with them about the safety and kind of who's your buddy and who's your backup plan. I'm not saying it can't end up beautifully and wonderfully. I mean, Gar, you have an example of it ending up in another way.
So let's drill down on the sex of it all with these celebrations, because for whatever reason, these events have been tethered to sexual, I don't know, leaps in sexual experience, right? Like always, this is not a new thing.
No. How many 80s movies were about losing your virginity on prom night?
On prom night, right? Like there's something about and maybe that's because it was like a big night of independence. It was a marker of I'm all grown up. I don't know what it was, but this connection between sexual exploration and these big end of year events is as old as time. And we got to talk about it. To your point, Vanessa, you got to talk about it if your kid is in a relationship. That's an important conversation to have. And as we know, because the relationship scape is like the upside down land now for all of us, you got to talk about it if your kid is not in a relationship. These conversations are complicated. And they're complicated because it is really hard to have them without bringing all of your baggage. It is just hard.
Right. And some parents may say, hey, I don't know if you're planning on having sex or not having sex, but let's get you some condoms in case you decide to have sex with your prom date or frankly, someone else. Because
someone else's prom date.
That actually often happens.
Yep.
Or the conversation may sound something like this. Hey, I know you and your prom date feel really close. I have no idea what you're deciding to do these days in terms of like sex or physical intimacy, but I'm wondering if there are some things you'd like to have with you in case you choose to do some things together. Again, those are two conversations that for many people could feel really difficult to have with their kid, and for other people, totally fine. So, Cara, I'm wondering if you have a script for people who those two options feel like beyond the pale.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to go to the script for people who are listening to this and thought, I mean, yeah, of course that sounds familiar, but I really wasn't thinking about it because I just didn't think it was sort of in my kid's line of sight. Not my kid. I have a good kid. So I would just take it as an excuse to have this conversation. Like, I love the excuse of, oh my God, in my day, like it was a thing that people talked about losing their virginity on prom. Is it a thing now? Do people still talk about that? Is that, do people, is there an equivalent for you guys? It's just an opening up of the conversation. And what's interesting about this, Vanessa, is that there's a lot of data that suggests that kids are delaying the first intercourse. They are having sex for the first time later. And you and I poke at this data all the time by saying, we're not certain we believe it because sex is not necessarily defined as inclusively as it should be. So kids might be answering a very specific question like penile vaginal intercourse. Have you had that? Are you having that? Whereas there are lots of different ways for people to be sexually intimate. And this is where parents often stumble over their words and feel very intimidated by the notion of having like towing into this. And so it doesn't just have to be about sex per se. It could be about just sexual exploration. It could be about, taking feelings you have and expressing them physically. But those then turn into conversations about how do you get consent? One of the most interesting conversations that I had with my kids around end of year celebrations was about alcohol and the role of alcohol when consent is needed. Because it's really important for us to all remember that if one or both people are intoxicated with alcohol or anything else, that consent is not legitimate consent. That doesn't, like, by the books, that's not true consent. And so the next 17 conversations, which are really interesting, go something like this. Okay, so you're telling me there's tons of alcohol or fill in the blank drug, and there's a lot of sexual curiosity or sexual activity or whatever it is. How do you square those things in a world where consent is really important and you've learned about consent, you know why it's important and you want to give it and you want to get it and all the things, but you can't when there are drugs and alcohol involved. So like, what have you been taught? What do you and your friends talk about? What is your path through? Right. And if they give you an answer that sounds too good to be true, it is.
Yep.
And you can poke at that a little bit. That's an amazing answer. But I'm kind of curious, like, really, you're going to call me to come pick you up from your post party,
and
or
they
whatever.
may have agreed with their prom date or whoever else that they're going to, do something, have sex or do something else physically on prom night. And then it comes to it and they're not feeling so great about that idea, or their prom date has been drinking too much, or they've been drinking too much. And so kind of scenario planning with them about that you always have a choice, that you always have a voice is really important. I love the sort of 90s teen movies as a great way to get into conversations about what can go wrong on prom night. She's All That, and the sort of good. Movies like that as a way to get into conversation if you're sort of figuring out how to have that conversation, I think is really great. The other thing I want to mention, Cara, is kids feel a tremendous amount of pressure for this to be like the most magical, amazing night. And then they're often met with real disappointment that it's just fine, or it didn't live up to the expectations. And so without bursting their bubble, because maybe they will have an awesome night, letting them know that, yes, there's a ton of buildup for this and it feels like a big deal and a lot of planning and a lot of excitement. And, sometimes things go sideways and it's about making the best of the night, even if it's not at how you might have planned it to go, and letting kids know that sometimes they have to pivot and be flexible, even in moments when they had built it up to be something really, really unique and special.
It's so interesting, Vanessa, because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I think that is so spot on for a certain cross section of kids. And then I'm thinking about the opposite cross section of kids who they
don't give a shit.
Well, or they don't have a date. Their friends set them up with a blind date. Like they got no skin in this game.
Right.
Like zero. And
those are the kids who are probably going to end up having the most fun.
Well, I mean, it's so funny because it's like we're speaking. Sometimes we don't know who we're speaking to. It's like when you and I teach in a classroom or in a workshop, and we've got 15 kids and they're coming from 15 different places on any given topic, right? The same is true here, where your audience, your kid audience, may be at a very different place in your. The word you just used, fun, those kids may end up having more fun. I was visiting my son at college last weekend, and I took him out to dinner, and he brought along one of his best buddies, and they started talking about a couple of people who were crazy. They're crazy and this, that, and the other. And finally, I was like, what does it mean to be crazy? Like, what does that even mean? And based upon the work you and I do, Vanessa, I assumed there was sexual innuendo there. I assumed there was alcohol or drugs. I assumed whatever. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I was so off the mark. So when you say those are the kids who have more fun, the word fun means so many different things to so many different people. And that's another conversation. Like, what does it mean to have fun? What would a great night look like? What would a wild night? Like if you told me, if someone says this kid is crazy, what does that mean? What are they doing? It's really fascinating. We went deep into that conversation, and I found it quite amazing because it had nothing to do with anything that I thought it would.
So let's shift to family dynamics. And that bridges us from prom to graduation, because family dynamics has to do with what role do parents or siblings get to play? What say do they have in photos? Are they in photos? What parts of the evening or day do they get to participate in?
I'm answering no to all of your questions. Go on.
So it depends. So like what I have learned to do with my kids is say, hey, I'm going to leave you alone for the most part. I would like one family picture, and I would like one picture with you. And other than that, I am just here as an observer to do what you need me to do. But I would like to be able to send your grandparents a couple of pictures, and we get it done and we get it out of the way ahead of time. And I stick to my word. Sometimes they want photos with their siblings. Sometimes they don't. That's at prom. At graduation, it is very clear there are going to be a certain set of photos taken that I don't want any complaining or attitude or eye rolls, that I will do it as quickly as I possibly can. And then after that, they can do whatever they want. But what I've learned to do because of previous larger family dynamics is to set expectations ahead of time, keep my expectations clear and limited, get it done, make sure they know I'm not taking any of their crap while I'm getting that done. And then I stick to my word and I back off and I let them do their thing.
And that applies to graduations at any age. That applies to graduation from 5th grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade, college, that it is a truly generic piece of advice that will serve you very well.
And it's so funny, Cara, because with my oldest, who's going to be graduating from college in a few weeks, I for months and months, I've been planning the dinners and the flights and the hotel, and my parents are coming. And I keep checking in with my kid. Hey, what do you want? What would be best for you? Where do you want to go? And he finally,
I don't care.
No, here's what he said to me. He said, Mom, I really appreciate all the work that you're putting into this. Remember, this is a kid graduating from college. You are not going to get that comment from most kids graduating from high school or middle school. He said, I really appreciate it. I have a whole senior week with my friends before graduation. That is my time with my friends. When you come down, it's my time with us as a family and with my friends' families. I want you to do what makes sense for our family, for my grandparents. Like, he definitely had a perspective that he was getting his time with his friends and that I could sort of navigate everyone else's needs and not put as much emphasis on his needs.
It might be helpful if he could record a video that we could have forwarded to all the listeners who are like, not my kid. Could my kid hear that from your kid? Because they're not going to hear from me. But I think that is a very evolved way of going through it. I know my son missed all the pre-graduation stuff in high school on account of sports. There are a lot of kids who have this happen. And in college, he's already watching the seniors who will some will miss graduation. They will miss a lot of the senior week festivities on account of sports. There are lots of things other than athletics that take kids out of the routine of that. So even if you have a really evolved kid, sometimes that scenario doesn't work out perfectly. There are other scenarios where I'm thinking about my daughter's best friend from high school. She and her family spend the entire summer across the country. They lived in Indiana when she was younger. They go back to Indiana where they have family all summer long. And for whatever reason, the plan was that they would get in their car. They drive across country so that they have a car. They would get in their car the morning after high school graduation. That was I guess there was someone else's graduation maybe happening over that. I don't know what it was, but that was a real game changer in terms of how she experienced. So like everyone has all these different variables that impact their ability to go through it in such a gracious way. I will also add that grandparents tend to have agendas when it comes to these events, prom included. A lot of grandparents really want to be part of a prom photo session, and that gets complicated if you're setting a boundary and someone else doesn't set the boundary, and then one set of grandparents hears from another that they were there. Saying this for a friend. And, the same, with graduation, you might have a limited number of seats, or there may not be the flexibility for someone to come. Maybe they live far away. Maybe they can't travel. Maybe they're all the things. And that carries its own set of weights, which are predictable.
Right. And if you are in a blended family, if you're divorced, if there are step parents and step siblings. And again, there's limited tickets and dynamics are complicated, but all of these things. We know, we understand the dynamics that you plan as much as you can ahead of time. That also includes if grandparents have disabilities, if you have family members who have special needs, physical or developmental disabilities, where you need to be in touch with the institution to make sure there's access. Things like hearing loss. Do they need special headphones to be able to hear the ceremony? We know all these things. I want to recognize how much work and planning and time and energy it takes to get ahead of all of these things. Ex-spouses, co-parents, grandparents, all of these things require time and energy. If you can get people to help you do this, if your kid can interface with the institution, if your siblings can be helpful, if your other children can be useful, all of these things so that you're not carrying all the burden, because planning ahead might help diminish some of the tension or any explosive behavior on the day, but it does mean you're spending a ton of time and energy ahead of it.
And I'll also say that there's an exploitative nature to all of it that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. The same hotel room that you stayed in all through your child's college career is suddenly 3 times as expensive because it's graduation day. These elements take a toll, right? And what I hear from kids routinely, and I hear from my own kids and their friends, but also from kids I don't really know, is that what we define as special is not what they define as special. You don't have to go to the fanciest restaurant. You don't have to do the photo session. You don't have to. There are ways to document and celebrate that are amazingly meaningful, that maybe if you haven't pulled your plans together and there aren't all the things available to you, or you don't have the resources to do it, are just as meaningful, if not more so. So I encourage people to let go of, I think generationally, our kids are much better about shedding this sort of perfection narrative, even with all the social media of it all around. Like, they figured out how to make something look better than real life on a phone. We are still living in the age of thinking it needs to be better than real life every step of the way. There will be fights. There will be disagreements. There will be stress. There will be logistics. And so I just think acknowledging that, knowing it ahead of time, it leaves you not flat-footed. It leaves you totally prepared to manage what is your own roller coaster ride, because your kid is going through a seminal event.
Right.
They're having a prom. They're having a graduation. Like, it's a thing. It's
That
a really big
takes
thing.
us to the final piece, which is managing our own emotions. So there's the desire, the emotion of, I want this to be perfect for my kid. How can I, have that happen? Hot take. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be a fight the morning of, someone's going to get a flat tire. Your kid's going to burn their shirt ironing it. I mean, whatever could go wrong will go wrong. And so keeping in perspective, what matters is that your kid has evolved as a human being to reach this point. That's super important. But for people who had a crappy prom or an issue at graduation or a big blow up fight with their own parents around grad parties, or just remember, you've had your experience. Talk to your best friend, your spouse, your therapist, unpack what went wrong with someone else who's not your kid. Let your kid have their experience, their journey. You can say to them, hey, listen, kiddo, I know you want this night to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be great. And we can roll with it and we'll do our best. That's all they need to know, that it's not going to go perfectly. But your own stuff, like, oh my God, my prom date ditched me on the side of the road and I had to walk home 4 miles in my 4-inch heels and my dress ripped. And, whatever it was, they don't need that story. They need the, hey, this is about you. I'm here for you. I'm so excited for you. If things don't go so well, I'm also here, but let's hope for the best.
So I'm going to land the plane. I'm going to end the episode by landing the plane on my prom story, because it has a happy ending. It was not a disaster of a prom. So we get in the limo.
This is the cocaine offer prom story.
We get in the limo. He offers me cocaine. And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm good. I think I said the 80s version of I'm good. And he was fine with that answer. He was like, okay, more for me kind of thing. And so I thought, okay, when we get to the prom, I think I'm not hanging out with him because he wasn't, my cup of tea. And so I sort of formulated a plan. Didn't know what the plan was. It just involved not hanging out with him. And I get that to the prom and everyone's streaming in their Jessica McClintock, very bubbly bridesmaids looking dresses. And I ended up at a table with a guy who I had had a crush on for my entire middle and high school existence. And he too had a disappointing prom date. I had never spoken to him ever in my life. And I spent the entire prom hanging out with my version of Jake Ryan. Now, it did not end in the Jake Ryan way, but it was amazing and it was fun. And it's like things turn on a dime. And I had a great prom. So the moral of the story is that even if someone offers you cocaine in a limousine, you can have a great prom. Like, even if it's not your dream vision in the beginning, not only can you rewrite the narrative and make it a great story, but actually there are ways to impart twists and turns to the kids in your life. If you don't have a good story, borrow mine, because it happened to have a happy ending and it worked out fine. And you don't always need a happy ending. That's the other piece.
Yeah.
Like, you can just have your prom experience and it could be very ho-hum, and that's fine too.
And just remind them, no matter what happens, no matter what they've done or where they've been, or if they did something they weren't supposed to, they can always call you. Say it again, and say it again, because they need to know, no matter what, they can call you.
Vanessa, you're the best. I can't wait to hear
prom
your prom
again.
Yeah, I kind of don't, but it's okay. I'm good.
I'll tell you my prom stories offline. They're not for public consumption.
We'll see if anyone from my family listens to this particular episode of the podcast.
Bye, Cara.
Bye, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.